All right, and welcome back to Think Like a Leader, where we explore the insights and mindsets of visionary leaders. Today, we're joined by Jim Carlough. He's a seasoned business strategist, speaker, and the author of The Six Pillars of the Effective Leadership, a Roadmap to Success. He has over 30 years of experience transforming teams and driving growth. And Jim believes leaders are developed, not born. And today, we're going to dive into his philosophy on leadership and the inner journey that shapes it. Nice to see you again, Jim. How are you today?
I am great, Dorian. It is so glad to see you, sir.
No, absolutely. You're telling me you're out in that Dallas heat, man. That sounds, as we say in my time apart, diabolical. That sounds so hot, man. But I'm glad you survived it. I want to talk about a topic and discuss a topic that is probably foreign to a lot of our listeners and was foreign to me actually until we spoke about it briefly. But for those that don't know, what is confident uncertainty and why is it important?
So, when I think of confident uncertainty, it reminds me of how grounded we need to be because we never know what's going to happen.
Mm.
We we can't predict the future. We can't predict a tragedy. We can't predict winning the lottery. If we could, we'd all win the lottery and everything would be much better for all of us. So I look at uncertainty from a confident perspective, saying, I'm going to be able to hit or manage head on whatever's thrown at me. And to be able to do that in such a way to know that I have access either to the people or the knowledge to help me get through virtually any situation that I could be thrown into.
I love that. And leadership is it's an uncertain game. You don't really know what's going on until you have to deal with it most of the time, and you can prepare for it as best as you can. But a lot of times it is the uncertainty that's behind it. It's like you have to adapt, essentially.
Correct.
I love that.
You never know. And from a leadership perspective, I'm very tuned into my team and their emotions, and I can sense when somebody's having an off day. But I don't know what that off is until I inquire so I can try to make it better. And that uncertainty, I know that I have to be able to provide some level of help, but I'm walking into uncharted waters potentially.
Do you think that's like a form of curiosity as well? I mean, because I think you have to be almost curious in those moments. What do you think?
I think you have to be curious, but I look at it from if Darian's having a bad day, then he's not going to be productive in getting what he needs to get done or moved forward at least. So if I'm noticing a different Darian today, I want to say, hey man, is everything okay? You just seem a little off today, and give you the opportunity to talk about it. And if you're willing to talk about it, we can work through it together. So you're not working through it alone. Could be you got up and your wife was sick or your child was sick or somebody's in the hospital or whatever. But those are all things that you and I can deal with. And I can help you by giving you time to deal with those or guidance or whatever it is that I need to do to assist you.
Is that something you had to learn over time, or is that something that you would say? Obviously, we've talked about the leaders are developed, not born, right? So I'm assuming it is something you had to learn. But what was that process like learning that skill? Because that's not easy. I've had 20 something odd jobs, and I can tell you I've had one leader, I think, maybe two, do that for me, right? So how do you learn that skill?
Well, I learned it two ways. One, just in it was the nature of my being, but the other was I graduated with a degree in psychology. Now it's only a bachelor's degree, but I got to understand people and emotions and understanding what could drive certain emotions or certain behaviors. And then I just continued to refine my ability to kind of observe and notice when things are different.
Gotcha. Okay. And did that start earlier in your career, or was it something that you would say it came into play more later in your career?
I think my mom would tell you that I was always the curious child.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, and we recently had that conversation. When I was 8 years old, I lost a brother in the Vietnam War,
Sorry
and
to hear that.
it devastated the family. But 2 years ago, my middle child and he gave me a gift at the beginning of COVID for my birthday, and it was a trip to Vietnam. And he said, "We're going to go find the spot where your brother died." And in 2023, we did that. We went for a week to Vietnam, and we got with the help of the military to the exact spot where he lost his life. When I didn't tell my mom too much in advance, but when I called to tell her what we were doing, she said, "I knew you'd be the one." And I said, "Why was that?" And she said, "Because you always asked questions that we couldn't answer. You were always the curious one." So I think it started when I was a child and probably continued on from there.
Man, that speaks to something that I enjoy because I'm a question asker too. I love knowing more than I probably should. If you ask my wife, she's always asking, "Why you always asking?" I'm like, "Well, because I want to know. Like I'm genuinely curious. It's not like I'm not questioning you. I'm just asking a question." And I think I get that from my mother as well. God bless her soul. She's an awesome person. She's not done nothing, but she's something. But I've always thought curiosity to be one of the biggest proponents to leadership and being an effective or successful leader, and push back on me if you think that that's not true, because I think the leaders that I've recognized to be good leaders, so to speak, are the ones that act like they don't know, or they don't act like they don't know anything. They know they don't know everything. So they're always looking to learn more. They always have this student hat on. You'll never see a leader be like, "Yeah, I'm the best leader ever." And they're always humble in that question asking and curiosity. So I want your opinion on that. Is curiosity something that you would say to be one of the, and I'm not going to say pillars, but something that is as important as anything in leadership or to be an effective leader?
I do think it's important. I think leaders have to recognize in today's world, nobody has all the answers. I certainly don't have all the answers. And I think the people that work with me will hear me say, "I don't know how to solve that, but I know we can find the answer." And then starting to peel that onion back out of curiosity to see what we can find and figure out how to solve whatever it is we're up against. And so I do agree with you that I think it's important. Whether there's 6 pillars or 26 pillars, it really doesn't matter because as leaders, you're always evolving. And that may be something that you learn early that just becomes innate in you and you just naturally do that. When I think of people who were important, but maybe not the smartest people in the room, I always think of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a great communicator, but he always surrounded himself with the smartest people. And to me, that makes a great leader. They know that they don't have all the answers, but they know collectively they can get to the answer.
Leaders always know it's a team effort. They always know it's not just them. I want you to briefly introduce the 6 pillars of effective leadership. I do want you to introduce them and just kind of go through line by line briefly, and if you want to speak on one or more and go into more detail, you can, but I would love the audience to know, what are these 6 pillars of effective leadership?
Yeah, and let me talk on how it started because I think it's important because somebody could always say, is there 6, 12, 18, or what's the right number? A couple of years ago, I started thinking about retirement and I started to think about what would I want to do in retirement because I certainly can't go fishing every day. That would just bore me to death. I love fishing, but to just go fishing every day, that's not me. And my mom, who's alive and kicking at 100 years old, when you ask her what's her secret, to living longevity, she said, "I keep myself busy. I don't have time to die. I have lunch on Tuesday with my friends. I have this on Friday." And her weeks are planned out. So I'm thinking of retirement and I'm thinking, what do I want to do? And so then I started thinking about, well, I've been mentoring people. I could do that professionally, which is what I'm going to do. And so then I thought about the people that I've mentored over the last 25 plus years. And I started to think about what made them special. And I started making a list of the characteristics. And I had something like 15 or 18 characteristics down. And I said, I can't write a book on 15 to 18 items and ask somebody to implement them. So how do I take this list and give somebody a true roadmap that if they did these X number of things, they could be very successful? And starting out, I didn't know the number would be 6, but at 7, I felt I wasn't there. And when I got to 6, it just felt right. So that's just so everybody who's listening there's no magic to the number. And the list was a lot longer. So maybe there'll be a second book down the road. I don't know. I haven't started that yet, but So I wanted to get focus on 6 things that I knew confidently that most people don't teach, and that when their employer comes to them and says, Dorian, I'm going to make you a manager. You get all excited, you get a new title, you maybe get some more money, but they don't tell you what success looks like. They don't, they think it's, it may be revenue focused or maybe whatever, but as a manager, you're going to be leading people. And to understand how to lead those people, I think is critically important. And that's how the 6 pillars came about, was I looked for characteristics that I knew people had to learn and weren't just picking up naturally from others. And so briefly, the 6 pillars are integrity, compassion, empathy, focus, stability, and humor. Of all of them, the one foundational or that center pillar that holds up the peak of the roof is integrity. To me, for a leader today, integrity is non-negotiable. It's just non-negotiable. I think we lack it in a lot of areas in this country. I think people lack it on social media. I don't get into the political discussions, and I don't get on social media and lob a bomb and go hide behind the curtain and watch everybody argue about it. And I think that is really starting to separate and cause ruptures or fractures in our social life and in the media and everything else. So to me, it's all about integrity, because if you don't have integrity, your team won't trust you. If you don't have integrity, your team will not be an active follower of you. And if you don't have integrity, you're going to have a team that's always rotating and people moving in and out because they can't trust what they're doing or learning, or they're not learning because of this lack of integrity that a leader may have.
No, I agree on that. But I want to play devil's advocate on this here and just say, what do you tell a leader or a person who hasn't necessarily had that integrity, right, in themselves or in what they do? They've lived this life, but they had their moment, and now they're coming to, and they want to live a different life. They want to be a different person from that. What do you tell that person that wants to have more integrity, that feels like a fraud right now as they walk into that? What are you saying to that person?
I tell them it's not wrong to feel like you have imposter syndrome. It's just that you haven't been shown the right way. And anybody can adapt to it and have it. And I'll tell you how I learned it. And it sort of hit me like a brick hitting me upside the head. In November of 1983, the same year I graduated in May of 83, in November of 83, I ran for a city council position in the town I grew up in New Jersey, and I won. And about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call at home from the city administrator who said, hey, if you get a chance, can you stop by? I'd just like to chat with you. So I went and saw him, and I sat down, and we started chit-chatting, and he congratulated me, said I was going to be very successful. And then he said, I'd like you to do me a favor. And I said, what's that? He said, every night when you lay down and go to bed and you put your head on the pillow, before you go to sleep, I want you to ask yourself one question. And that question is, did I do anything today for my own personal self-interest that was at the expense of another individual, group of individuals, or organization? He said, if you can say no to that question, then you can rest easily. But if you answer yes to that question, before you go to sleep, you need to figure out whether you can unwind what you did and what you need to do to never do it again. And do you know, I ask myself that one question every night to this day.
That's game changing. That's game changing, especially at a young age hearing that too. Or that probably transformed, and yeah, it did transform your entire trajectory.
It absolutely did. It has, throughout my career, that has been the and I've worked for people who have not had integrity. I didn't stay with them long, but it was something that to my core I was not going to be in an environment where I couldn't trust, or I potentially could be doing something for somebody else's personal best interest. That just doesn't work with my DNA.
And you got to respect that, because I think integrity, like you said, integrity is the cornerstone to everything, just as your character as an individual. I know my dad used to say, you are the person when no one's watching. That's who you are. Or that's the person that you are. So don't, the facades you may put up and do all this other stuff, that's cool. In reality, the person that you are is when no one's watching. And to me, he always said that was integrity, when you can do the same things when people are watching. And when they're not watching. And I think that's an important takeaway. But what would you say to someone that's trying to build their integrity, right? Like there's still that person's like, I know I need to be it, but I've been stuck in this way of not being this way for so long. What are like some actionable steps, like something that I could do today, tomorrow, that that could help, that so I can build on this initial principle of being having integrity, excuse me.
I would I would literally tell him exactly what Don had told me in his office,
Yeah.
which is every day, figure out whether or not you behaved with integrity or not. And if not, write it down and figure out how to change that so you never do it again. I can't recall a night where I've ever said the answer yes to that question. And it's probably because at a young age, I learned it and I never got corrupt from that behavior or from that philosophy. But it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that people don't try to corrupt you, right? Or try to change your opinion, but it's a matter of being able to try to stay true to yourself to the point of your dad. Am I going to behave the same way when somebody's not looking?
It speaks to self awareness too, right? Like you have to be very self aware to even know that this is something that you either have or don't have, or either are doing or not doing, So I think self awareness has a lot to do with that as well, staying true to yourself. You spoke on something in the book, and I'm actually going to pull it up real quick because I thought it was something interesting that I've never heard. And I want you to kind of speak more on it. And you said a key issue for today's leaders is the gap between what's possible and what's achievable. What does that mean? And how are leaders actually bridging this gap?
I think there's two parts to that. We may only be able to achieve this much today, but this is the possibility. You know what? Let's take a look at Jeff Bezos. In the mid 90s, he started a company to sell books online, but that wasn't his vision. His vision was to be able to deliver virtually anything, including food and groceries, to your home in a matter of hours. His vision never changed. What he achieved was done in milestones.
Okay.
And so when you put it in that context, I have this future vision, but I'm going to have to take it in bite-sized chunks to get there.
I didn't get that from it, so I appreciate you explaining it. But that makes perfect sense, because it's the milestones that are the achievements, but you still have your overarching goal, but you still have the
Correct.
overarching vision. Okay, so if anyone's listening, right, like I think it's important to take away that achievements are the steps, right? They aren't the end goal, right? So celebrate them, do your thing, but if you have a vision, you gotta keep going. What I want to know more about one of the things that I thought was interesting was one focus. Focus isn't taught today at all. And it's even going further away with social media, with AI making things quicker. How are you as a mentor, as a coach, helping your leaders focus on the things that matter? Because there's a lot of noise.
There is a lot of noise, and the level of the noise has changed dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. And we're being bombarded more so than we ever have. And I don't think social media helps it. I think social media hurts it, unfortunately. That's my personal opinion. I think that a lot of people have made themselves the sounding board or the lecturer of what is socially right or what is socially wrong. And I can say it and I can hide behind it, even though it's got my name on it. And it's unfortunate. But you know what? It's always been there. It's just much worse than it has ever been. And I say that because the one class I remember most from college was a class called Contemporary Moral Values. And there was no textbook for the class. You had to bring in either the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or the Washington Post to class. You had to look at, if you were called upon, you had to take an article from the main section of the newspaper that starts on the first page, continued somewhere in the first section, and discuss number one, what is the religious background of the writer? Number two, what is the political background of the writer? Number three, what is that writer trying to convince you to believe in? Now, remember, I said I graduated college in 1983, right? I still remember that class. And during COVID, I literally had to stop watching the news because depending on what channel you turned to, the answer was different. And what that told me is I can't trust any of it.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw during that time, not to talk COVID stuff, but there was a moment where, um, and it happened on social media where they combined all the news stations. I think it had to be 50 to 60 news stations that were reading the same thing across the entire station. Like I think it was either Fox or MSNBC. And I tell you, it was the scariest thing I've ever seen because that's what made me realize, oh, it is television programming. Like, that now I get it. That was the moment that it clicked in my head. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I should be watching TV as much as I do. In my I don't watch. I'm not a news person. I get the weather, I get the traffic, and I'm off and I'm off the channel. You know what I mean? Because I have to tell my wife sometimes to stop watching it. She's a news person at times. Yeah, you can't.
Yep. Weather, traffic, and sports.
Yeah, and sports. But even then, right now, I haven't even been watching the sports because of the narratives. I see like it's narratives have been throwing me anyway. That's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different conversation. We could talk about Stephen A. another day. Yeah, he's something else. But yeah, I believe that the focus level of not only just my peers but just people in general today has been so focused on the wrong things.
Mhm.
So how are you in your space helping these leaders focus on what matters?
So I measure the things that are going to impact the result. So, in my role as chief sales officer, I measure not the close ratio, but the things that have to be done at the beginning, the middle, and the end of a sales process,
Mm,
and know that something's tracking along that paradigm to be able to hit that endpoint and to remind people of the importance of each individual step in getting something through a process and then to an end. So I don't want to say I idiot proof it, but I want them to know that making 20 phone calls a day is important. Interacting with people that have a need for what we do is important. Looking at ESPN to find out who won last night can be done at lunchtime.
yeah. So, could you walk us through so people can get a visual, like if they want to know like, how you're doing it from a sales perspective? I have an idea, but idiot proof is for us on the podcast. How do these metrics align? Or is it the law of averages that's happening here? What are you finding out with that process?
So I'm finding out how disciplined the team is in following the process and ensuring that the outcome happens. And also at the same time, showing them how the end result will grow by following the steps that I've put in place. So people have metrics in terms of outbound activity, but they also have metrics in terms of the size of the pipeline that they need to have based upon historical numbers of close ratio, and so that we can ensure that we have an adequate pipeline to meet the expectations of the company. And all of those things work towards that end goal. And so an interesting thing happened a few years ago. We tripled the size of the company in a matter of 4 years. And we not only tripled the size of the company and tripled the client base, but our close ratio went from 11% in year one to 64% in year four.
My God.
Yes.
All from changing the things ahead of the close.
Because if you're only looking at the end goal, you're not paying attention to the things you need all along the way.
I actually heard someone, I think it was Alex Hormozy, said something about that. He said, simply just control the inputs. Don't worry about the outputs. And
Right.
that's basically what that sounds like to me is like you're controlling the inputs, how many outbounds, how many things that you do. And it makes the have or the thing that you receive on the end inevitable, almost basically. Not guaranteed, right? Sales is sales, but for the most part, if you follow the process, there will be a return at the end of it. Is that basically it?
That's absolutely correct. And there's two favorite sayings that I have. The numbers never lie.
Yeah.
And if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen.
Well, I'm sure your team loves that one. I was
They
just
don't like that.
yeah,
They don't like that one.
they were like, "No, but I did that." If it's
Nope.
not in Salesforce, I don't know what you're saying. It sounds like Charlie Brown's dad. What's going on? That's hilarious, man. But I think you can equate that to anything though, right? Like the inputs being way more important than the outcome, and
Correct.
I want you to speak about how you're the 6 pillars. How can we input these into our lives to become more effective leaders? How can we implement these into our daily lives? Not even just necessarily for leadership in the boardroom, but leadership at home, leadership in the community. How can we implement these?
You know, when I started to write the book, one of the key things I wanted to focus on was that I gave people something that they could implement, but they didn't have to implement them all at once. You could start at the beginning and go 1 through 6, or you could start backwards, or pick out the thing that you think you may need to focus on most and start there. And each pillar, as you're seeing, we talk about the pillar, you'll hear a personal story, you'll hear some references to other people in the world that exhibit that characteristic. So if you want to learn more about stability, one person I reference in the book is Warren Buffett. Go read a book about what Warren Buffett has done ever since he was 11 years old, because he's done the same thing the same way every day and every year. Stability. And then also some exercises or some ideas of how you can implement those. I don't want to be portrayed as the person who knows it all. I don't. I can help you with the knowledge. I can point you in the direction, but it's a matter of taking action and internalizing those things to be able to implement them for yourself.
People hear it on the podcast all the time. I say raw action beats no action every time. Like, you just have to just do it, like Nike, and figure it out along the way. That's what this kind of goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, was confident uncertainty, right? It's almost like a leap of faith in a weird way. For some reason, that word brings me to faith. You believe in what you're doing, you believe in your purpose, your vision. And so you have the confidence behind it. But we all know, living in this world, everything is really uncertain. We only know to the moment today. There's nothing else that's guaranteed. So having that faith to walk in, it's blind. The journey's 99% fog for the most part. So
Right.
you really don't know if it's going to work out or not. You just have to believe in it. Man, I appreciate it, man. I think this has been a fantastic conversation. Is there anything else, that you would think or want to leave the audience with, so they can put some action, like have an actionable insight so they can do something at the end of the podcast? What's the one thing or two things that you would advise them? Or
The one thing I would tell them is find a mentor. I'm big on mentoring. And I don't think in the business world we do enough of it. I think my job is not just to turn results around for the company. My job is to create the leaders for the next generation. And I've learned a lot by mentoring other people because I've learned from each and every one of them. And I think if people have a mentor, they're going to reduce a lot of their own stress in life, because they have somebody that they can work with to help them through challenging decisions that they have to make. That's the one thing I would leave.
how do people find mentors? I know I struggled with it previously in my life, but I would want to know, from your perspective, being one, what is something that you are like, yeah, no, I'll mentor you? Or have you seen previously, like, how do people find mentors?
So I would say look at people that you admire in your social circle and start there. Your mentor is not your manager. Not that they can't be, but your mentor, you need an independent, non-biased person that isn't the same person giving you direction. So, for example, some of my mentors have been former leaders that I either reported to or worked in organizations that I worked in that I admired, that I felt had the same characteristics of what being a good leader represented. And I would start there, and I would make a list, and I would rank, I got Dorian on the list. He's number 3. Okay. So now I got Bill, who's number 2, and Sally, who's number 1. I'm going to call Sally first, reach out to her and say, Sally, we've known each other for a long time, and I'm embarking upon and, making myself a better leader. Would you be interested in serving as a mentor for me? And just ask. The worst thing that happens is they say no, and you go to number 2. Somebody's going to say yes.
Yeah. And for anyone that's listening, I found that also to be very true. Where I had the fear of, like, I don't want to bother them. They're so busy. They don't want to mentor me. It's like, I'm going to be honest with you. If you're listening, they probably do if you ask, but you won't know, if you don't ask. Closed mouth don't get fed kind of deal. You know what I mean? I think something else you just said that I that I had to recently learn that's okay to be is being intentional about who you select in your life and who you select as a mentor, as a friend, as anything. I think that's something that gets poo-pooed on, I think, because it's like, why are you being so cerebral about it? It's supposed to just be a natural thing. It's like, no, I think it's very intentional to create the circle that brings you to the place that you seek and want to be. I used to have this weird relationship with that, a very weird relationship with that. But I urge you, it's okay to be selective with the people you allow in your life. And as we have Jim saying, be very intentional with the mentors you select in your life, because it could, as my mentor would say, help you skip the line. Because a lot of it you're going to see online, you're going to do all these courses, you're going to do all these classes, and really you could have just asked someone 3 questions and put yourself in a position that's far, far, way further than anyone else has. So be intentional with it. It's okay. No one's looking at you like you're weird. You're not sleazy for doing it. You're not any of those things, right? You're just being intentional with the people that are in your life. Sorry, I went on my little tangent, but like I said, that came on my heart recently, and I was like, man, I'm sick of feeling like I'm not a good person because I'm being intentional with who I allow in my life. Like, no, I'm just being intentional.
Another way to look at it is there's only so many hours in the day. Do I want to waste them being with people I don't like?
You said it
No.
better than me. Yeah, you're right. You don't. It's a waste of time. I'd rather be with my son, rather be with my wife, I'd rather be speaking with people I've met, Mr. Jim Carlough. I'd rather be having conversations that are meaningful. So be intentional. But last thing, I know you had something that you wanted to talk to our audience about and offer our audience. So the floor is yours, Mr.
So, Dorian, thank you. And so, for everyone that's listening into this episode, first of all, thank you for listening. And thank you for listening to the end. One of the things that I'm looking to do is to collect feedback. And I'm sure Dorian would be interested in it as well. So, what I'd like to do is offer 3 signed copies of my book, which we've spoken about on this show. Now, here's the trick. You're going to post a comment to Dorian's social media page that he's going to tell you what it is. And the first 3 people who do will receive a copy of the book. Do not post your address to social media. Dorian will reach out to you, or I will reach out to you for your address in private. But so please do not post your address, but please tell us what you took from this show today, positive or negative. We're all learning too. We're students of this. And I look forward to your input. So, Dorian, thank you for having me here. And audience, thank you for listening.
Yes, Jim, thank you so much. For everyone that's listening, you already know the deal. Like, click, subscribe. All of the information is going to be in the show notes, where you could find Mr. Jim Carlough. Most of it's probably going to be his links that he's providing here, but as well, I'm going to provide the link where you can leave the comment. I'm going to post this on Twitter, X, as they call it today, and LinkedIn, okay? And I'll be watching because I have my notifications on, so I will know the first 3 people to respond to this. And please don't post your address. Golly, please don't post your address. For the last time, please don't post your address. But thank you for joining us for another episode of Think Like a Leader. Hope you guys have a good one. Enjoy. Peace.